President Trump pledged throughout his campaign to assemble a deportation force to remove millions of undocumented immigrants from the United States. Now we're getting a look at the state of that effort. The Washington Post obtained an internal progress report from the Department of Homeland Security that outlines a number of steps toward establishing that promised deportation force. Earlier, I spoke with Washington Post reporter David Nakamura, who was the first to report on this document. I asked him to describe the specifics of the report and lay out where it comes up short.
People may remember the president signed 2 executive orders on immigration. These are not the travel bans. These were interior enforcement and border security in the United States back in January. And what this document is a 90-day progress report, almost 3 months in now to the president's administration, spelling out exactly where the Department of Homeland Security is in implementing what the president wants. And it goes everything from the state of the border wall, initial plans for construction, to additional space to detain illegal immigrants who are in the country until they have court hearings, to the status of President Trump's efforts to hire thousands more Border Patrol agents and thousands of more Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers. And so it's a sweeping sort of look at this. What we have is sort of a summary over 12 pages of each of these areas, and it shows, that they've made some progress. However, it also cautions that a lot of this is expensive and they'll need money from Congress.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that in just a moment, but you touched on this. So in your piece, you mentioned that Customs and Border Protection is considering ending polygraph and physical fitness testing to speed up the hiring of some agents. What does that suggest about this administration's determination to follow through on its campaign promises?
Yes, this is a really interesting part of it. And, the idea of them hiring thousands of new agents, sounds maybe good to people who voted for Donald Trump, who are concerned about immigration. And there's 11 million undocumented immigrants in the country. But others say, look, this is a big effort to sort of have mass deportations. And the bigger issue, as you point out, is to hire this many agents is not easy. There's a lot of standards that have to be met, obviously, on your trustworthiness as a potential officer. And so that's why they've established this polygraph testing, to your physical fitness, to background checks. And so to try to streamline this may sound like something that's making the program more efficient, but it could lead to many more concerns that we've seen in the past. Border Patrol agents and ICE agents have been accused of missteps, of acting inappropriately, of not having the right training and oversight. That's what's led to some of this buildup in sort of the background checks. And so to sort of speed that up could open up room for future problems.
And so you mentioned cost a moment ago. What do we know about what some of these proposed measures would actually cost? For instance, the hiring of additional Customs and Border Patrol agents.
As I mentioned, the president's executive orders talk about 15,000 new officers and agents to work in immigration enforcement. And this report says that the Customs and Border Patrol Agency is looking at hiring 500 of those agents, next year in fiscal 2018 at a cost of $100 million. So just multiply that out many times over to get to the point where you could hire actually 15,000 of these agents. It almost looks like an impossibility just based on cost. And we already know that Congress is balking at the billions it could cost to build this border wall that President Trump has talked about. This is also addressed in the document that I looked at and talking about, if they could get the initial funding for about $1.5 billion, they could start with 34 miles of wall in Texas along the Rio Grande corridor, which is the most highly trafficked area for illegal immigration, as well as 14 miles in San Diego. But again, even that is something that Congress is balking at right now. Most Democrats are against it. Some Republicans don't want to spend that money either, and it looks like Congress is going to punt to later in the year to address this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of folks, as you well know, in Congress just don't have the appetite for spending this kind of money. At the same time, you've got an administration that's also talked about potentially pushing an infrastructure bill that is going to be a very costly one if that goes through. Congress holds the purse strings here. So with that in mind, what's the reality here of these proposals that are outlined in this progress report?
I think that some of them are probably DOA. We're talking about the wall, talking about this many more Border Patrol agents. Now, could you scale that down and start with a smaller number? Yes, probably. There's a lot of pressure on President Trump and his administration to make good on this idea that they're going to deport many more immigrants than President Obama did who are here illegally. They've talked about just going after sort of the bad hombres or those who've committed serious crimes. But if you look at some of the executive orders the president has laid out, it expands the pool of immigrants who are potentially targeted for removal. And so it's opened up that possibility. Now, another area of this report that's interesting is there's an existing program used by the Bush administration, the Obama administration, to partner with local police agencies and sort of deputize them with immigration enforcement powers, which are traditionally the area of the federal government. Trump wants to expand this, not just for ICE, but also for the Border Patrol, which has never used this program. It's very controversial because people have documented that there's been a lack of accountability among these police forces, even though they're supposed to be overseen by ICE. But this document says that 50 jurisdictions already have expressed interest. Another 18 have already applied. The most that ever have been a part of this was 72 jurisdictions years ago, and now 68, according to this document, have already expressed interest in joining it. So you could see a scaling up of that. That could maybe save the government money by sort of putting some of the costs on local law enforcement. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if that in fact takes place. Well, David, we are coming up, of course, on the 100-day mark of the Trump presidency. He hasn't been able to complete many of his proposed agenda items. Your report comes a day after the Attorney General announced some immigration enforcement priorities. What is your sense of the timing of all of this? Does there seem to be a greater sense of urgency to discuss some of these plans that are in motion?
That was my sense. The Department of Homeland Security appeared to validate that this was a legitimate document that I had obtained, but they did not want to comment on it. They called it a working document, sort of pre-decisional piece of, sort of assessment. But I think it was the title on the document says 90-day progress report, and one wonders if maybe the agency chiefs are trying to get together, where they are heading into 100 days to sort of report that to the White House for possibly like a rollout of the things that the administration has done. So you've seen the administration have a number of setbacks, from the travel ban, which has been held up in court, to the unsuccessful efforts at this point to repeal Obamacare. And so on. So I think the administration might try to make the point, though, that they're moving quickly in other ways to fulfill some of these promises, especially on immigration, which was such a core area for this president.
Yeah, a lot of pressure on the administration to show that it has made some progress on its goals. David Nakamura from the Washington Post, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks a lot.